Historians often trace the origins of Chinese civilization back to the founding of the Xia Dynasty, which emerged over 4,000 years ago. However, little concrete information is available about this dynasty, which was succeeded by the Shang Dynasty. The Shang Dynasty, which reigned from approximately 1750 to 1045 BC, was predominantly an agricultural society. It was governed by an aristocracy, a privileged upper class that derived wealth from land ownership, with power passed down through generations. Archaeological discoveries have revealed evidence of impressive urban centers in Shang China. The Shang kings may have shifted their capitals multiple times, with 5 different cities possibly serving as capitals before the final capital was established in Anyang, located just north of the Huanghe in north-central China. Excavations in these areas have unearthed massive city walls, royal palaces, and expansive tombs for royalty. The political structure of the Shang Dynasty centered around the king, who ruled from Anyang. The kingdom was divided into territories overseen by aristocratic military leaders known as warlords. Although these warlords exercised local power, the king held the authority to appoint or remove them. The king's responsibilities included defending the realm and commanding large armies, frequently fighting along the kingdom's borders. The significance of the king's role is further emphasized by the elaborate rituals and sacrifices performed at his death. Similar to the traditions of ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, Shang kings were interred in royal tombs, often accompanied by the corpses of their loyal servants. The social hierarchy of the Shang period placed the royal family at the top, followed by the aristocracy. The aristocrats played a dual role. They were both warriors and government officials, and they also served as the primary landowners. The majority of the population consisted of peasants who worked the land owned by the aristocracy. In addition to these 2 main groups, Shang society included a smaller number of merchants, artisans, and slaves. Religious beliefs played a central role in Shang society. The Shang believed in supernatural forces, which the rulers sought to engage for assistance in worldly matters. Priests acted as intermediaries, using oracle bones to communicate with the gods. Questions, such as whether the king would be victorious in battle or recover from illness, were inscribed on these bones. Metal rods were heated and pressed into the bones, causing them to crack. The priests would interpret the patterns of the cracks as responses from the gods, and the answers were recorded on the bones. These inscriptions are an invaluable source of knowledge about the Shang Dynasty. Human sacrifices, discovered in royal tombs, suggest the Shang people made efforts to win favor from the gods. The early Chinese also believed in an afterlife, which gave rise to ancestor veneration, commonly referred to as ancestor worship in the West. This practice included burning replicas of objects, which were meant to accompany the deceased on their journey to the next world. The importance of treating ancestors' spirits with respect stemmed from the belief that these spirits had the power to influence the fortunes of the living, either positively or negatively. The Shang Dynasty is perhaps most renowned for its advancements in bronze casting. The Shang produced bronze vessels, which were often used in ceremonial rituals. Many of these bronze artifacts have been found in tombs across the Shang kingdom. Over 10,000 bronze objects have survived to the present day and are considered some of the most admired works of Chinese art. According to legend, the last ruler of the Shang Dynasty was a cruel tyrant who indulged in ponds of wine and ordered the creation of music that ruined the morale of the nation. This decadence and misrule spurred the leader of the Zhou state to rise against the Shang. Ultimately, the Zhou overthrew the Shang and established a new dynasty, which would become the longest-lasting in Chinese history. Governing for nearly 800 years, from 1045 to 256 BC. The Zhou Dynasty retained many aspects of the political system of its predecessors, the Shang. At the top of the governmental hierarchy stood the Zhou king, supported by a growing and increasingly complex bureaucracy. The kingdom was divided into territories, each ruled by aristocratic officials, appointed by the king and accountable to his authority. As with the Shang, the Zhou king commanded the military and oversaw national defense. The Zhou justified their rule through the mandate of heaven, a concept asserting that heaven, as an impersonal force of nature, granted the Zhou king the right to govern. The king was viewed as the intermediary between heaven and earth, ruling under this mandate. This principle became foundational to Chinese governance. However, the mandate of heaven carried responsibilities. The king was expected to govern with virtue and efficiency, adhering to the proper way, known as the Tao. He needed to keep the gods appeased to protect the people from disasters or poor harvests. Failure to meet these duties could justify his overthrow. This idea also introduced the concept of a right of revolution, allowing for the removal of an unjust ruler. While the king served as heaven's representative, he was not considered divine. Each new dynasty claimed the mandate of heaven, a right that could only be challenged by the successful overthrow of the current ruler. The phrase, "He who wins is the king, he who loses is the rebel," aptly encapsulates this belief. The mandate of heaven was intricately tied to the pattern of dynastic cycles, a recurring theme in Chinese history until 1912. Dynasties would rise to power, govern effectively for a time, and then decline as governance weakened, leading to rebellions or invasions. A new dynasty would then emerge, restarting the cycle. The Zhou Dynasty, after nearly 800 years of rule, eventually collapsed. For much of its history, the dynasty governed with wisdom and efficiency, but in its later years, the quality of governance deteriorated both intellectually and morally. The Zhou realm had been divided into smaller territories, some of which grew into powerful states capable of challenging the central authority. In 403 BC, these tensions erupted into civil war, marking the beginning of the period of the warring states in Chinese history. This era brought significant advancements in Chinese warfare. Iron weapons, which were stronger than the bronze weapons previously used, became widespread. Armies saw the introduction of new military forces, including infantry and cavalry. The cavalry was equipped with the crossbow, a powerful weapon invented in China during the 7th century BC. During the Zhou Dynasty, the foundational elements of Chinese social and economic structures began to take shape. The Zhou maintained the system of land ownership established during the Shang Dynasty, with peasants working on plots owned by their lords. Each peasant family farmed a separate plot for personal use, while also collectively tending the lord's land. Additionally, artisans and merchants lived in walled towns under the control of local lords. Unlike in modern economies, merchants were not independent, but were considered the property of the lords. A class of slaves also existed within the social hierarchy. Trade during this time initially focused on local goods for daily use, but gradually expanded to include items from distant regions. Traded goods included essentials such as salt and iron, as well as luxury items and textiles. The family occupied a central role in Zhou society, symbolizing the foundation of social order. This significance stemmed in part from the labor-intensive nature of farming, which required close cooperation among family members. Peasants not only worked their lord's land, but also cultivated their own plots for sustenance. Children were essential contributors to the household's labor force, and sons were expected to continue agricultural work while caring for their aging parents. At the heart of Chinese family life was the principle of filial piety, which mandated that family members prioritize the needs and wishes of the male head of the family. This principle extended to all familial relationships, creating a structured system where each member had a clearly defined role. Filial piety later became a cornerstone of Confucianism, deeply influencing Chinese culture and values. Male dominance was a prominent feature of Zhou society, much like in other contemporary civilizations. Men were responsible for providing for the family, working the fields, serving as warriors, and holding roles such as scholars and ministers. Women, meanwhile, managed domestic duties and child-rearing. Although women did not hold formal positions of power, some royal women exerted influence at court, where they participated in political and ceremonial affairs. Between the 6th and 3rd centuries BC, the Zhou dynasty saw substantial economic growth and technological advancements, especially in agriculture. For millennia, Chinese farmers had relied on rainfall to cultivate crops like rice and millet. By the 6th century BC, however, Irrigation systems had become widespread, and large-scale water management projects were undertaken to regulate river flows and distribute water across fields. These innovations significantly boosted agricultural productivity. The introduction of iron around the mid-6th century BC revolutionized farming. Iron plowshares enabled farmers to cultivate previously untouched lands, expanding the amount of arable land. Improved farming tools and methods led to higher food production and supported population growth. By the late Zhou period, China's population had grown to approximately 50 million. Advances in agriculture also stimulated trade and manufacturing. Silk emerged as one of the most significant trade items, becoming highly prized along ancient trade routes. Evidence of Chinese silk has been discovered as far afield as Central Asia and Athens, Greece, underscoring the existence of an extensive trade network during this period. A major cultural achievement of ancient China was the development of its written language. By the time of the Shang Dynasty, the Chinese had created a rudimentary script that formed the basis of today's complex written language. This early script was primarily pictographic and ideographic. Pictographs depicted physical objects, such as characters for mountain, sun, and moon. Ideographs combined pictographs to convey abstract ideas, such as the character for east, symbolizing the sun rising behind trees. While other ancient civilizations eventually abandoned pictographs and ideographs in favor of phonetic symbols to represent speech sounds, such as the Roman alphabet, the Chinese written language retained much of its original structure. Over time, some phonetic elements were incorporated into certain symbols, but the script has largely preserved its foundational elements. Despite continuous evolution over 4,000 years, the Chinese written language remains a remarkable link to its ancient origins. Between 500 and 200 BC, during the late Zhou Dynasty, three influential schools of thought, Confucianism, Daoism, and Legalism, emerged as central pillars of Chinese philosophy. They sought to understand human nature and the structure of the universe. Unlike Hinduism and Buddhism, which aimed to liberate the soul from the cycle of rebirth, Chinese philosophers prioritized concerns with the material world and the creation of a well-ordered society. Each philosophy proposed distinct answers to the challenges of governance and social stability, reflecting the rich and dynamic evolution of Chinese intellectual traditions. Confucius, known in China as the first teacher, was called Master Kung by his followers. The westernized version of his name, Confucius, derives from Kung Fu Zi, which means Master Kung. Born in 551 BC, Confucius aspired to become a political advisor, though he struggled to find a patron. Troubled by the violence and moral decline of his time, he traveled across China, attempting to persuade political leaders to adopt his ideas. While his teachings were not widely embraced during his lifetime, a loyal group of followers revered him as a wise teacher. They recorded his ideas in a text called the Analects and helped to disseminate his message. Over time, Confucianism, based on the teachings of Confucius, became deeply ingrained in Chinese culture. His sayings were studied by nearly every Chinese student until the 20th century. Confucius lived during an era of chaos, marked by relentless warfare and the widespread violence against men, women, and children. Amid this turmoil, he sought to restore order to China by proposing a comprehensive framework of ideas that later gained widespread acceptance. His philosophy focused on political and ethical principles rather than spiritual matters. Confucius avoided speculation about spiritual questions, considering such inquiries unproductive. Instead, he taught that the universe operated according to a natural order, and that humans could achieve harmony and prosperity by aligning their actions with this universal order. In Confucian philosophy, two key elements define the Tao, or the way: righteousness and humanity. Righteousness calls for individuals to act morally and fulfill their obligations, balancing the well-being of family and community with moral principles. This idea is encapsulated in the 5 constant relationships, which outline the roles and responsibilities between father and son, ruler and subject, husband and wife, elder and younger siblings, and friend and friend. Each relationship carries specific duties. Fathers should show affection, and sons should demonstrate filial piety. Rulers must act with righteousness, and subjects should remain loyal. Husbands and wives should respect their distinct roles. Elder siblings should show kindness, and younger siblings should demonstrate respect, and friends should honor mutual commitments. Confucius underscored the central role of family in cultivating virtue, emphasizing that filial piety, children's duty to their parents, serves as the root of all other virtues. In his philosophy, this concept of duty extends beyond families to encompass a broader work ethic, where fulfilling one's responsibilities with diligence and integrity is paramount. Confucius believed that if every person earnestly committed to their respective roles and duties, societal harmony and prosperity would naturally follow. Confucius also emphasized that true virtue begins within. He taught that when righteousness resides in one's heart, it shapes a person's character with beauty and integrity. This inner beauty fosters harmony within the home, which in turn contributes to order within the nation. Once a nation achieves such order, peace will naturally extend across the world. Most importantly, Confucius advocated for rulers to lead by example. A king who embodies goodness would naturally earn the respect of his subjects, fostering a thriving society. Confucius further advised rulers to treat their people with kindness and familial respect to inspire loyalty. He believed that by supporting virtuous individuals and guiding those who were less skilled, a ruler could cultivate a society where people are motivated to improve themselves and uphold moral principles. In Confucian philosophy, the second key element of the Tao is humanity, which centers on compassion and empathy toward others. Confucius advised that people should refrain from treating others in ways they themselves would not want to be treated, urging them to consider the feelings of others as if they were their own. He emphasized that within the 4 C's, all men are brothers, encouraging mutual respect and support, akin to the bond between siblings. Confucius was a strong critic of the society of his time, advocating for a return to the values of the early Zhou Dynasty's golden age, which he regarded as a time of moral clarity and social harmony. Many of his ideas were forward-looking, including an innovative political vision. Government service should not be restricted to those of noble birth, but should instead be open to individuals of superior talent, regardless of their background. This merit-based approach to governance challenged the power held by the aristocracy. Although Confucius's ideas had little influence during his lifetime, they laid the groundwork for a new perspective on governance that would later gain widespread acceptance. Daoism is a philosophical system rooted in the teachings of Lao Tzu. According to tradition, Lao Tzu, or the Old Master, is believed to have lived around the same time as Confucius, though scholars debate whether he was a historical figure. The core principles of Daoism are expressed in the Tao Te Ching. While scholars have long debated its interpretation, the fundamental tenets of Daoism are relatively straightforward. Daoism emphasizes understanding the essence of the universe and living in harmony with nature as the foundation of a balanced and fulfilling life. Lao Tzu suggested that humans, unlike other creatures in nature that naturally align with the Tao, often stray from it. He observed that humans frequently engage in debates about right and wrong or good and bad, which he regarded as distractions from living in harmony with the natural order. Daoism fundamentally differs from Confucianism. While Confucians believe humanity's duty is to work diligently to improve life on Earth, Daoists assert that the path to harmony with the will of heaven lies in inaction, not action. However, inaction does not imply doing nothing. Instead, it refers to avoiding forced or desire-driven actions and aligning oneself with the natural flow of the universe. A third influential philosophy in ancient China was legalism. Unlike Confucianism or Daoism, legalism asserted that human beings were inherently evil. Known as the school of law, legalists rejected the Confucian belief that governance by virtuous superior men could resolve society's problems. Instead, they advocated for a system governed by strict impersonal laws. Legalists believed that a highly efficient and authoritative government was essential for restoring social order. While Confucius taught that leading people by virtue and guiding them with moral principles would instill a sense of shame and inspire goodness, legalists argued that only harsh laws and severe punishments could maintain obedience. This emphasis on punishment over positive reinforcement reflected their belief that fear of consequences was a more effective tool for governance than moral incentives. According to legalism, people were inherently selfish, and genuine virtue was difficult to achieve without external control. Moreover, legalists argued that rulers were not obligated to show compassion toward their subjects. Therefore, their emphasis on the supremacy of law and strict governance became the defining principles of their philosophy. Between 400 and 200 BC, China experienced a period of intense civil war as central authority declined and powerful states clashed. This turbulent era, known as the Warring States period, followed the earlier Spring and Autumn period. Amid the conflict, the Qin Dynasty emerged as the dominant power. Situated in western China, Qin initially lagged behind its rivals, but rose to prominence through strong leadership and reforms in politics, economics, and military strategy. These reforms were heavily influenced by legalism, a philosophy that emphasized centralized power, strict laws, and efficient governance. Qin Shi Huangdi, whose name means First Emperor of Qin, was an ambitious ruler who ascended the throne in 246 BC at the age of 13 as the King of Qin. Initially guided by a regent, he gradually consolidated his power and implemented reforms that strengthened his kingdom. By 221 BC, he had successfully defeated rival states, ending the Warring States period and unifying China for the first time in its history. After unifying China, Qin Shi Huangdi implemented a series of policies aimed at establishing a centralized government. He mandated the use of a unified currency throughout the empire, streamlining regional transactions and strengthening economic integration. This policy significantly promoted trade and commerce, contributing to economic growth. To enhance connectivity, Qin Shi Huangdi constructed an extensive road network spanning over 4,000 miles. These roads radiated outward from the capital, Xianyang, facilitating efficient governance and military mobility. Beyond administrative and military purposes, the newly built roadways also fostered active trade within the empire, significantly increasing regional economic exchange. To standardize usage, cart axle lengths were regulated, ensuring all vehicles conformed to the uniform road ruts. Qin Shi Huangdi also standardized scripts, laws, currency, and weights and measures across the empire. This initiative ensured consistency in communication and administration, enhancing commercial transactions and the efficiency of tax collection. The emperor's agricultural reforms included large-scale irrigation projects, which expanded arable land, prevented flooding, and improved food self-sufficiency. These efforts boosted agricultural productivity and supported the growing population. Qin Shi Huangdi left behind an extraordinary artistic legacy, exemplified by the Terracotta Army. In 1974, farmers digging a well approximately 35 miles from Xi'an discovered the Terracotta Army, a monumental archaeological find. The Terracotta Army is not merely a collection of military statues, but a vast artistic recreation of the Emperor's Imperial Guard. It is estimated that the first pit alone contains around 6,000 life-size terracotta soldiers, along with horses, wooden chariots, and approximately 7,000 bronze weapons. Other pits are believed to house additional figures, artifacts, and various items. The creation of the Terracotta Army was a meticulously planned process. The soldiers were crafted slightly larger than life size. They were first shaped using molds, fired in kilns to harden the clay, and painted in vibrant colors before being dressed in detailed uniforms. Each soldier's face was individually finished using 10 distinct head molds that were further refined by hand to give each figure a unique appearance. This extraordinary terracotta army not only reflects Qin Shi Huangdi's grand vision and ambition, but also symbolizes his desire to secure his legacy and protect his realm, even in the afterlife. The construction of the Great Wall was one of the most ambitious projects initiated by Qin Shi Huangdi. The Xiongnu, a nomadic group residing near the Gobi Desert, posed a significant threat to the northern frontier of the Qin Empire. They lived a nomadic lifestyle, moving seasonally in search of pastures for their livestock, which included cattle, sheep, and goats. Skilled in mounted warfare, the Xiongnu mastered the art of archery on horseback, making them formidable opponents. In response to this ongoing threat, Qin Shi Huangdi undertook the massive project of fortifying and connecting existing regional walls to create a unified defensive structure known as the Wall of 10,000 Li. A li is roughly a third of a mile, or half a kilometer. While this early version of the Great Wall was not the monumental stone and brick structure familiar today, it was primarily constructed of loose stone, sand, and rubble. However, Qin Shi Huangdi was determined to close the gaps in the existing walls and extend them along key strategic points of the empire's border. His strategy aimed to create a formidable barrier that would significantly delay or deter invaders, forcing them to navigate around protected regions. The Qin dynasty brought significant changes to Chinese politics, introducing a centralized and authoritarian system under the leadership of Qin Shi Huangdi. Legalism was adopted as the official state ideology, emphasizing strict laws and harsh punishments to maintain order and control. To suppress dissent, Qin Shi Huangdi, along with his prime minister Li Si, targeted Confucian scholars and intellectuals. Hundreds of Confucian scholars lost their lives, and books that contradicted legalist principles, including those written by Confucian thinkers and poets, were publicly burned. Practical books, such as those on medicine and agriculture, were the only exceptions. These actions aimed to eliminate opposition and enforce ideological conformity. To weaken the power of rival warlords and aristocrats, Qin Shi Huangdi implemented a policy known as strengthening the trunk and weakening the branches. He forced approximately 120,000 noble families to relocate to the capital, Xianyang, placing them under his direct surveillance. Their lands were confiscated and redistributed to peasants, who were then taxed directly by the central government. This policy not only reduced the power of the aristocracy, but also increased state revenues and strengthened the emperor's control. The Qin dynasty established a highly centralized administrative structure, dividing the empire into 36 administrative districts. Each district was governed by officials appointed directly by the emperor, rather than through hereditary positions, as in the Zhou Dynasty. This ensured loyalty to the emperor and allowed for greater control over local governance. The central government was organized into 3 divisions: civil, military, and the censorate. The censorate played a critical role by inspecting government officials to ensure they performed their duties properly. Corrupt or negligent officials were punished. This system of centralized control and oversight became a model for future Chinese dynasties. Through these measures, Qin Shi Huangdi established an autocratic system in which the emperor wielded unlimited power. While his policies effectively unified China and centralized authority, they were also marked by harshness and suppression. The Qin dynasty, despite its historical significance as China's first unified empire, lasted only 15 years, from 221 BC to 206 BC. Qin Shi Huangdi, the first emperor, established a centralized and authoritarian regime, implementing harsh policies rooted in legalism. These policies included strict censorship and heavy taxation. Notably, the forced labor required for massive construction projects, such as the Great Wall and his elaborate tomb, resulted in the deaths of many laborers due to grueling physical demands, extreme fatigue, and harsh winter conditions. While these measures solidified the emperor's control and unified the empire, they also created widespread resentment among various social groups, including peasants, Confucian scholars, and aristocrats. After Qin Shi Huangdi's death in 210 BC, his son ascended the throne, but proved to be a much weaker and less capable ruler. His continuation of his father's oppressive policies further alienated the population. By 209 BC, widespread dissatisfaction led to a series of peasant uprisings, culminating in the capture of the Qin capital, Xianyang, in 206 BC, marking the end of the dynasty. The Han Dynasty, spanning over 400 years, is divided into 2 periods: the former Han and the later Han. The former Han, lasting from 202 BC to 9 AD, was marked by significant territorial expansion and the establishment of Confucianism as the state philosophy. After a brief interruption by the Qin Dynasty, the later Han, from 25 AD to 220 AD, restored stability and witnessed the resurgence of trade along the Silk Roads. Regarded as one of the greatest dynasties in Chinese history, the Han Dynasty was established in 202 BC by Liu Bang, a man of humble origins. Despite his background as a farmer, Liu Bang demonstrated exceptional leadership and political acumen, earning the title of Emperor Gaozu of Han. Under his rule, the Han Dynasty swiftly consolidated control over the empire and laid the foundation for a golden age characterized by political stability and cultural development. The Han Dynasty abandoned the harsh legalistic policies of the preceding Qin Dynasty and instead adopted Confucian principles as the foundation of its state philosophy. This shift emphasized social harmony and ethical governance, laying the groundwork for Confucianism to become deeply entrenched in Chinese political and cultural life. However, the Han retained certain administrative structures from the Qin, such as dividing the central government into 3 branches: civil, military, and the censorate, ensuring an efficient system of governance. The empire was also divided into administrative regions, or commanderies, to improve local governance and accommodate a rapidly growing population that exceeded 60 million. A key feature of Han governance was its meritocratic approach to appointing officials, which was inherited from the Qin Dynasty. Officials were selected based on ability rather than noble lineage, a significant departure from previous dynastic traditions. This system eventually evolved into the imperial examination system in later dynasties, which became a cornerstone of Chinese administration for nearly 2 millennia. Schools were established to educate candidates in Confucian teachings, Chinese history, and law, ensuring a well-prepared bureaucratic class. The Han Dynasty also significantly expanded China's territorial boundaries. Under Han Wudi, whose name, Wu, signifies a martial emperor, the empire grew to include regions south of the Chongjiang and parts of present-day northern Vietnam. Coastal areas along the South China Sea were also incorporated into the empire. In the west, Han armies extended China's frontier into Central Asia, pushing back the Xiongnu beyond the Great Wall. These military campaigns secured China's borders and facilitated trade along the Silk Road, contributing to economic prosperity. During the Han Dynasty, advancements in technology and culture significantly contributed to the era's prosperity. Innovations in textile manufacturing, the use of water mills for grinding grain, and iron casting greatly improved economic productivity. Iron casting technology was particularly noteworthy, as it led to the invention of steel. Another groundbreaking development during the Han period was the creation of paper by Kai Lun, which became an essential tool for communication and record-keeping. The invention of paper had a profound impact on the Chinese government. Previously, all government documents were recorded on strips of wood, which were cumbersome to use. Paper, being far more convenient for record-keeping, facilitated the expansion of the Chinese bureaucracy. Over the following centuries, the art of papermaking spread beyond China. It first traveled east to Korea and Japan in the 6th century, then westward to the Arab world in the 8th century, and eventually reached Europe. The Han Dynasty also witnessed remarkable progress in maritime technology. The invention of the rudder and fore and aft rigging allowed ships to sail against the wind for the first time. This innovation enabled Chinese merchant ships to carry heavy cargo across long distances, supporting trade throughout Southeast Asia and India. As a result, the Han period experienced a significant expansion in trade networks, enhancing the empire's economic and cultural influence. Another significant accomplishment was the compilation of key Confucian works into a set of Confucian classics. These texts, while primarily used for educating elites and government officials, laid the foundation for a standardized moral and social framework that influenced Chinese society for centuries. Over time, these classics became a cornerstone of Chinese education, shaping students' values and behaviors, and reinforcing Confucian ideals in governance and personal conduct. Despite economic and cultural advancements, the Han Dynasty faced significant challenges. One of the main issues was economic inequality, caused by practices that allowed the wealthy to accumulate more resources at the expense of the poor. According to custom, family land was divided equally among all of a father's male heirs. Unless farmers could afford to buy more land during their lifetimes, each generation inherited smaller plots. These smaller plots made it increasingly difficult for farmers to produce enough food for their families or for sale. As a result, many small farmers fell into debt and were forced to borrow money from large landowners, who often charged exorbitant interest rates. If the farmers could not repay their loans, they lost their land to the landowners. Large landowners were exempt from paying taxes, and as their landholdings increased, the amount of taxable land available to the government decreased. To compensate for this loss of revenue, the government imposed heavier taxes on small farmers, further widening the gap between the rich and the poor. During this period of economic turmoil, political instability also intensified. Within the palace, court advisors, servants, and influential families engaged in complex intrigues to influence the emperor's succession. From 32 BC to 9 AD, a series of inexperienced emperors occupied the throne, leading to chaos within the court and widespread unrest across the empire due to peasant revolts. Eventually, Wang Mang, a Confucian scholar and court official, determined that a strong leader was needed to restore order. Acting as regent for a child emperor, he ultimately declared himself emperor in 9 AD, overthrowing the Han Dynasty and ending the former Han period. Wang Mang implemented reforms to address the empire's issues. He introduced a new currency to alleviate treasury shortages, established public granaries to aid the poor, and confiscated large landholdings for redistribution to displaced farmers. However, these policies angered powerful landowners, and his monetary reforms disrupted the economy, triggering inflation. In 11 AD, a massive flood struck, killing thousands and leaving millions homeless. The public granaries proved insufficient to feed the starving and displaced population. Additionally, the rise of regional warlords and the weakening of central government control contributed to widespread peasant revolts across the empire. During this upheaval, large landowners who opposed Wang Mang's land policies also joined the rebellion. In 23 AD, rebel forces assassinated Wang Mang. 2 years later, Lu Shu, a member of the former imperial family who would later become Emperor Guangwu, ascended the throne, marking the beginning of the later Han Dynasty. In the early decades of the later Han Dynasty, peace returned, and the empire experienced relative prosperity. The government reasserted control over trade routes along the Silk Roads, sending soldiers and merchants westward. However, this expansion failed to resolve the internal social, political, and economic issues that had plagued the former Han. Within a century, the empire again faced economic inequality, political corruption, and social unrest. The dynasty ultimately collapsed in 220 AD, leading to the division of China into the three kingdoms of Wei, Shu, and Wu. This marked the end of one of China's most influential dynasties. Following the collapse of the Han Dynasty in AD 220, China endured over 3 centuries of political fragmentation and internal conflict. With no central authority strong enough to reunite the land, the nation remained divided and in turmoil. In 581, the founding of the Sui Dynasty under Emperor Wen Di marked a turning point, setting the stage for efforts to restore unity. By 589, Emperor Wen Di successfully reunified northern and southern China, bringing an end to the prolonged period of disunity. Although the Sui dynasty was relatively short-lived, spanning from 581 to 618, its impact on China's development was profound. One of the dynasty's most notable accomplishments was the construction of the Grand Canal, a project completed under Emperor Sui Yongdi, the second ruler. This extensive waterway connected the Huanghe in the north to the Changjiang in the south, effectively linking China's 2 major river systems. While both rivers flow west to east, the Grand Canal created a vital north-south link, facilitating the transport of essential goods, particularly rice, from the fertile agricultural regions of the south to the populous northern cities. Stretching over 1,000 miles, the canal became a critical link between China's economic hubs, fostering greater unity and strengthening the nation's economy. However, Emperor Sui Yongdi's reign was marked by excessive demands on his people. Large-scale state projects, including the Grand Canal and the restoration of the Great Wall, relied heavily on forced labor, involving millions of workers. These projects, combined with burdensome taxes, the emperor's lavish lifestyle, and military campaigns that strained resources, fueled growing resentment among the populace. The widespread dissatisfaction eventually led to a rebellion, culminating in the assassination of Emperor Sui Yongdi in 618, and the abrupt collapse of the Sui Dynasty. Despite its short duration, the Sui Dynasty's achievements laid the foundation for the remarkable stability and cultural flourishing that followed under the Tang and Song dynasties. These later dynasties built upon the Sui's contributions, steering China into an era of innovation, prosperity, and global prominence. The Tang Dynasty, one of China's most influential dynasties, emerged after the fall of the short-lived Sui Dynasty. Established in 618 by Emperor Gaozu, the Tang Dynasty lasted nearly 300 years, until 907. Among its most notable rulers was Emperor Tang Taizong, whose reign from 626 to 649 is remembered for its stability and expansion. Taizong consolidated power after a coup and successfully reconquered northern and western territories lost following the decline of the Han Dynasty. His leadership laid the foundation for a prosperous empire. Under the Tang rulers, China expanded its influence further. By 668, the Tang armies extended China's reach into the Korean peninsula. During this period, Empress Wu Zhao rose to prominence. Although officially not the emperor until 690, Wu held real power from the 660s, as weak emperors sat on the throne. In 690, she became the first and only woman in Chinese history to formally assume the title of emperor, ushering in a unique era of governance under her rule. Building on these achievements, Tang rulers worked to strengthen China's position as a dominant power in East Asia. In the northwest, they restored stability to regions plagued by unrest and secured control over territories bordering Tibet, extending their influence into areas north of the Himalayas. This not only reinforced China's borders, but also established strategic alliances that expanded the empire's reach. Meanwhile, Tang China's prestige as the central power in East Asia grew through tributary relationships with neighboring states, including Korea. These connections solidified China's regional dominance and facilitated cultural and economic exchanges. Tang rulers also cultivated strong ties with Southeast Asian states, promoting trade and diplomacy that further elevated China's status as a leading power of the era. The Tang Dynasty strengthened its central government by expanding infrastructure projects initiated during the Sui Dynasty, including roads and canals. These developments enhanced trade, improved agricultural efficiency, and fostered greater unity across the empire. Additionally, Tang rulers revitalized the civil service examination system, which had been introduced during the Han Dynasty. This rigorous system, though theoretically open to all men, was primarily accessible to the wealthy, who could afford years of education. Despite its limitations, the system shifted power from noble families to educated elites, creating a more capable and meritocratic administration. Emperor Xuanzong of the Tang Dynasty began his reign with significant achievements, overseeing the Yuan era, a time of political stability, economic growth, and cultural flourishing. This era established him as one of the most admired rulers in Chinese history. However, his later years were marked by personal indulgence and poor governance, which ultimately led to the Tang Dynasty's decline. Xuanzong's relationship with Yang Guifei, a commoner who became his favorite concubine, deeply influenced his later reign. Infatuated with her, the emperor lavished her with luxuries, maintaining a large court of entertainers and sending riders vast distances to bring her fresh fruit. This preoccupation, combined with corruption among his closest advisors, weakened the imperial court and diverted attention from state affairs. In 755, General An Lushan, one of Xuanzong's most trusted commanders, launched the An Lushan Rebellion, plunging the empire into chaos. The rebellion caused immense destruction and loss of life, crippling the Tang Dynasty's power. During the uprising, soldiers blamed Yang Guifei for the unrest and demanded her execution. Reluctantly, Xuanzong ordered her death, and he reportedly lived the rest of his life in sorrow. Xuanzong's missteps and the rebellion marked a turning point for the Tang Dynasty. signaling the end of its golden age and the beginning of its decline. In the decades that followed, the Tang Dynasty faced mounting challenges as it struggled to recover from the rebellion's devastation. By the mid-700s, the financial demands of governance led to heavy taxation, causing widespread hardship among the population. In 751, the Tang army suffered a decisive defeat at the Battle of Talas against the Abbasid Caliphate, weakening China's influence in Central Asia. This loss, combined with internal corruption and unrest, gradually eroded the dynasty's strength. Border attacks and rebellions grew more frequent, further destabilizing the empire. The Tang Dynasty ultimately fell in 907 due to the internal fragmentation and the rise of regional warlords. The final Tang emperor, Emperor Ai, was forced to abdicate, marking the end of the dynasty. Despite its fall, the Tang Dynasty left a lasting legacy of cultural and political innovation, influencing China and neighboring regions for centuries. After the fall of the Tang Dynasty, China entered a period of chaos, with various warlords dividing the land and ruling independently. In 960, a skilled general named Zhao Kuangyin reunified China through his military prowess and political insight, and proclaimed himself Emperor Taizu, founding the Song Dynasty. The Song Dynasty lasted from 960 to 1279, spanning nearly 3 centuries, and achieving notable economic prosperity and cultural development. The Song rulers implemented a merit-based civil service examination system, emphasizing scholarship and administrative ability through a policy known as civil governance. This approach fostered political stability and cultural growth, but also exposed the state to weaknesses in military strength. From its early years, the Song faced significant challenges from its northern neighbors. It failed to recover the western territories once controlled by the Tang Dynasty in Central Asia, and was unable to reclaim the northern lands seized by nomadic tribes during the Tang's decline. To maintain peace, the Song emperors adopted a policy of paying large annual silver, silk, and tea tributes to northern adversaries. However, this strategy ultimately failed to neutralize the threats from the north. In the early 12th century, the Jurchen, a Manchurian people, rose to power and established the Qin Dynasty in 1115. By 1127, the Jurchen had captured the Song capital, Kaifeng, which forced the Song to retreat south of the Huanghe. The Song rulers relocated their capital to Hangzhou, a thriving city south of the Changjiang. The period when the capital was in the northern city of Kaifeng is referred to as the Northern Song by later historians. After the fall of Kaifeng and the capital's relocation to the south, the dynasty became known as the Southern Song. Despite losing northern territories, the Southern Song era witnessed significant economic growth. Southern China became the country's economic heart, with merchants in the region thriving through trade with Central Asia, West Asia, and Europe. Limited trade also continued with the Qin Dynasty along border regions. However, the Song's military weaknesses left it vulnerable to external invasion. In the 13th century, the Mongols, a nomadic group from the Gobi Desert, began a campaign of conquest under Genghis Khan. Starting in 1211, the Mongols launched attacks on the Qin Dynasty and gradually expanded their empire. Over approximately 70 years, the Mongols defeated both the Qin and the Southern Song, completing their conquest of China in 1279. Although the Song initially allied with the Mongols to counter the Qin, this alliance backfired. Following their victory, the Mongols established the Yuan Dynasty, bringing all of China under their rule and initiating a new political and cultural transformation era. The period from the Sui Dynasty's founding to the Song Dynasty's fall spanned nearly 700 years and marked a crucial phase in Chinese history. The centralized political system, originally established during the Qin and Han dynasties, continued to evolve during this era. The Sui and Tang dynasties reinforced strong centralized rule. In contrast, though maintaining central authority, the Song Dynasty saw a shift toward a more refined bureaucratic system, emphasizing civil governance. During the long period of political fragmentation and civil war following the fall of the Han Dynasty, aristocratic landowning families expanded their control over vast estates. Many peasants, particularly those displaced by war and economic hardship, lost their land and became tenant farmers, or dependent peasants, under the authority of powerful landlords. This concentration of land ownership deepened social inequalities and limited economic mobility for the rural population. Despite these challenges, China remained an agrarian society, with the majority of its population engaged in farming. The Sui Dynasty implemented the equal field system to distribute land to farmers and secure taxation and labor obligations. The system continued to function during the early Tang Dynasty, but by the mid-Tang period, it had begun to decline, particularly after the An-Lushan Rebellion. However, in 780, the two-tax system was introduced under Emperor Daozong, shifting taxation from household registration to land and wealth assessments. By the Song Dynasty, the equal field system had long disappeared, and the concentration of land among large landowners further intensified. Many farmers became tenant farmers, while others managed to retain small landholdings, or engaged in commerce and handicrafts in the growing urban economies. During the Northern Song period, Wang Anshi introduced reforms such as the Green Sprouts policy, which aimed to provide low-interest loans to farmers, while reducing reliance on landlords and money lenders, as part of broader state-led economic and administrative reforms. One of the most significant agricultural innovations occurred in the early 11th century, when China introduced a new variety of fast-ripening rice from Vietnam through trade and diplomacy. This new strain allowed farmers, particularly in parts of southern China, to cultivate 2 rice crops per year instead of just 1, significantly increasing rice production in many areas over time. Recognizing the importance of this innovation, the Song government encouraged its adoption. Advancements in irrigation systems, including improved water-lifting devices such as the Dragon Bone pump, also significantly boosted agricultural productivity. Additionally, improvements in plowing techniques, including the wider use of deep plowing methods and animal-drawn plows, enhanced soil fertility and increased land utilization, further supporting a stable food supply for the growing population. As a result of these agricultural and economic developments, China experienced significant population growth during the Tang and Song dynasties. The population reached approximately 100 million by the Song period, reflecting substantial demographic growth. The rise in food production facilitated urbanization, leading to the expansion of cities. By the Song dynasty, China had several major cities, some with populations approaching or exceeding 1 million. Between the 3rd and 5th centuries, long-distance trade declined, as the collapse of the Han Dynasty and the weakening of the Roman Empire disrupted the Silk Road. Political fragmentation in China and conflicts between the Byzantine and Sasanian empires further hindered trade. However, in the 7th century, the Tang Dynasty restored centralized rule in China, and the rise of the Islamic Caliphate unified much of Southwest Asia, reviving Silk Road commerce. China exported silk, porcelain, and paper, receiving exotic woods, precious stones, and tropical goods. As a result, Chang'an flourished, becoming one of the world's wealthiest cities, with over 1 million inhabitants. China engaged with neighboring and distant regions, as foreign trade expanded under the Tang and Song dynasties. The Tang protected the Silk Road, but by the 9th century, their declining control weakened land-based trade. In response, Chinese merchants increasingly relied on maritime trade, aided by innovations like the magnetic compass. By the Song dynasty, China had developed a thriving maritime network, connecting its ports to Korea, Japan, India, the Persian Gulf, and even Africa. This shift from overland to sea-based trade ensured China's continued dominance in global commerce. During the Song dynasty, China saw a major economic transformation. While agriculture remained vital, commerce and monetary transactions gained prominence. One key development was the expansion of paper money, alongside the rise of markets and merchant guilds. The Song dynasty issued the world's first known government-backed paper money, which was officially circulated as currency. Initially, jiaots was introduced by merchants in Sichuan in the 10th century as a substitute for cumbersome metal coins. In the early 11th century, the Northern Song government officially adopted and began issuing jiaots as state-backed currency. By the Southern Song period, Hoits, which had existed in limited use during the Northern Song, became a fully state-controlled and widely circulated official currency. With thriving trade, markets flourished in cities and regional hubs, including night and informal markets. Urban markets became hubs for trade, connecting rural producers with consumers and merchants. Merchant guilds like Han and Zhou emerged, supporting commerce by regulating trade, mediating disputes, and working with local authorities on taxation. These economic developments stimulated domestic commerce and strengthened China's position as a dominant economic power in the medieval world. The Song Dynasty's advancements contributed to economic growth in later dynasties and significantly shaped long-distance trade networks. During the Tang and Song dynasties, Chinese artisans and scholars made significant technological advancements that profoundly influenced both their own civilization and the wider world. Among the most notable inventions of this period were movable type and gunpowder. During the Tang Dynasty, block printing, a method in which entire pages were carved into single wooden blocks, became more widely used and refined. Each block could be reused multiple times, making it possible to produce thousands of copies. Block printing was a significant advancement in printing technology. However, it had the disadvantage of being unmodifiable once the text was carved. During the Song Dynasty, movable type was developed, allowing printers to arrange individual character blocks to compose a page. Once a page was set, thousands of copies could be printed. However, because the Chinese writing system contains tens of thousands of characters, the process of selecting and arranging the necessary types was highly complex and time-consuming. As a result, while movable type was useful for small-scale printing, it did not fully replace block printing for large-scale production. Nevertheless, this innovation marked an important turning point and laid the foundation for future advancements in printing technology. One of the most influential inventions of the Tang Dynasty was gunpowder. Originally developed by Chinese alchemists for medicinal and Daoist alchemical purposes, gunpowder was later adapted for military use. The fire lance, an early gunpowder weapon, was among the first to incorporate gunpowder, combining a spear with a small tube filled with explosive powder to launch flames and projectiles. Over time, gunpowder technology advanced, developing explosive weapons such as bombs, grenades, small rockets, and cannons. During the Tang Dynasty, China made important advancements in metallurgy, particularly in steel production. By using coal in blast furnaces to heat and refine cast iron, Chinese metalworkers developed more efficient methods of producing steel. This innovation led to the manufacture of durable tools and weapons, such as swords and agricultural implements, which significantly impacted agriculture and warfare. In addition to these advancements, the Tang and Song dynasties also saw improvements in mechanical clock technology, the first government-issued paper money, and the application of the magnetic compass in navigation. These technological and scientific innovations not only contributed to the prosperity of China, but also had a lasting influence on other civilizations, shaping global history in the centuries to come. The Song Dynasty was a rich period for Chinese mathematics, characterized by major developments in arithmetic, algebra, and polynomial equations. Chinese mathematicians made notable contributions, such as the systematic use of negative numbers and advances in solving higher-degree polynomial equations. These advancements laid a strong foundation for later mathematical progress in China and influenced mathematical thought in neighboring regions. During the Song Dynasty, the Chinese deepened their understanding of the human body through forensic investigations and medical diagrams, illustrating acupuncture points, meridians, and the relationships between internal organs. Acupuncture was a treatment method that involved inserting slender needles into specific points on the body, depending on the nature of the problem. This understanding and research contributed to the systematization of acupuncture techniques. Song-era physicians refined these techniques and improved their effectiveness, further solidifying acupuncture's role in Chinese medicine. Another notable development was the expanded cultivation and use of cotton in China. The increased use of cotton produced softer, more breathable, and versatile textiles, revolutionizing China's textile industry. Chinese merchants formed trading communities across East and Southeast Asia and parts of the Indian Ocean region. Many foreign traders, including Arabs, Persians, and South Asian merchants, resided in Chinese port cities. Through trade and travel, Chinese culture spread throughout East Asia, and China played a key role in transmitting Buddhism to Vietnam, Korea, and Japan. The growing popularity of Buddhism continued into the early years of the Tang Dynasty. The early Tang emperors supported Buddhist monasteries established throughout the country, and Buddhist monks even served as advisors at the imperial court. However, over time, Buddhism gradually lost imperial favor. Buddhism was criticized for being a foreign religion and for its growing economic and political influence. Like Christian monasteries in medieval Europe, Buddhist monasteries in China acquired vast tracts of land and relied on peasants and laborers for agricultural production. This land ownership led to corruption, prompting the government to respond strongly. During the later Tang period, the government destroyed many Buddhist temples and monasteries, particularly those with large landholdings, and forced more than 260,000 monks and nuns to return to secular life. Buddhism taught that the material world was impermanent and lacked inherent existence, which was perceived as contradicting the core Confucian values of devotion to family and diligence, virtues that were central to the Chinese state. From the Song Dynasty until the end of the dynastic era in the 20th century, the official state ideology evolved into a revived form of Confucianism. This new philosophy, known as Neo-Confucianism, integrated elements of Buddhism and Daoism while maintaining a Confucian foundation. Neo-Confucianism asserted that the world was real rather than an illusion, and emphasized that individuals should actively participate in society. Neo-Confucianists conceptualized the world in terms of principle and vital energy, believing that humans existed in the material world, but were also connected to the supreme ultimate. The ultimate goal was to transcend the material world and achieve unity with the supreme ultimate through rigorous examination of the universe's moral principles. The prosperity of the Tang and Song dynasties nourished an age of artistic brilliance. The Tang period is considered the golden age of Chinese poetry, producing many great poets. Two of its most celebrated poets were Li Ba, who wrote about Taoist themes, nature and life's pleasures, and Du Fu, who emphasized Confucian values, but also wrote critically about war, social injustice, and the hardships of ordinary people. During the Song period, poetry remained an important literary form, and significant achievements were made in painting, particularly in landscape art and ceramics. During the Song Dynasty, landscape painting reached its peak, deeply influenced by Taoist philosophy. Chinese painters emphasized the harmony between mountains and water, reflecting Taoism's pursuit of balance in nature. Human figures, such as a lone fisherman in a small boat, or a traveler ascending a mountain path, were depicted as part of the vast natural world, embodying the Taoist perspectives on humanity's place in nature. During the Tang Dynasty, porcelain-making techniques advanced significantly, laying the foundation for further refinement during the Song era. They were characterized by simplicity and elegance, featuring refined glazes and meticulous craftsmanship. The production of celadon and white porcelain reached new heights, influencing later Chinese ceramics and pottery traditions across East Asia, including Korea and Japan. Women's status in the Tang and Song dynasties varied depending on social class and period. During the Tang Dynasty, upper-class women could participate in horseback riding, polo, dancing, and music. Some women, particularly in the imperial court and aristocracy, influenced politics and culture. Empress Wu, the most famous woman of the Tang Dynasty, was the only woman in Chinese history to rule as emperor officially. She strengthened the civil service examination system, curtailed aristocratic power, and expanded diplomatic relations with neighboring states. Although upper-class women enjoyed certain freedoms, most women were still subject to patriarchal traditions. Most marriages were arranged for political and economic reasons, and women were expected to prioritize family duties. The dowry system was present throughout the Sui, Tang, and Song dynasties. In Tang times, the groom's family customarily offered a bride price, while the bride's family also provided a dowry. By the Song dynasty, the dowry system became more institutionalized, and a substantial dowry was often necessary to secure a favorable marriage. Wealthy families viewed dowries as a means to ensure their daughter's status within her husband's household, while poorer families struggled to provide an adequate dowry. During the Song Dynasty, Confucian values were emphasized, and women were expected to be more modest and obedient. The practice of foot binding became widespread among upper-class women, permanently deforming their feet, causing great pain and restricting their mobility. Women's roles became more centered on the household, and social expectations emphasized their virtue and submission. In the early 13th century, Temujin united the Mongol tribes scattered across the Mongolian plateau and emerged as a powerful leader. In 1206, he was proclaimed Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler. After unifying the steppe, Genghis Khan established social and military structures to form the Mongol Ulus. The term Ulus originated from a Mongolian word meaning a group of people. Over time, it came to refer to a larger political unit, eventually taking on the meaning of state. Genghis Khan reinforced royal authority by enforcing strict laws and laid the foundation for the future development of the Mongol Empire. After defeating the Western Shah and the Qin dynasties, Genghis Khan's forces went on to destroy the Khwarezmian Empire and expanded Mongol control across Central Asia. Through continued military campaigns, they created a vast empire that spanned the entire Eurasian continent and brought together the nomadic and agrarian worlds. After the death of Genghis Khan, the Mongol Empire was divided into several Ulus. From his power base in the eastern territories, Kublai Khan eventually rose to power and founded the Yuan Dynasty in 1271, making Dadu its capital. In 1279, he unified China and became the first ruler from a nomadic people to govern the entire Chinese territory. The Yuan dynasty ruled over all of China and implemented a variety of governing methods based on region and ethnic group. At the same time, the Mongols adopted traditional Chinese institutions, but enforced a discriminatory system based on Mongol dominance. The highest government positions were monopolized by a small number of Mongols, while financial and administrative affairs were handled by foreigners from Central Asia, West Asia, and Europe, who received favorable treatment. In contrast, Han Chinese, who had lived under the Qin Dynasty, and other ethnic groups, were classified as Hanren and placed under tighter control. Han Chinese from the former southern Song were labeled Nanren and faced the harshest discrimination. While these policies helped the Mongols preserve their own cultural traditions, they also deepened tensions between different ethnic groups over time. During the Yuan dynasty, agriculture was actively promoted, and as cotton cultivation spread widely, the textile industry experienced significant growth. At the same time, increased trade and cultural exchange between East and West led to the development of large markets. Linan, the former capital of the southern Song Dynasty, emerged as a major hub of international trade. The Grand Canal was renovated and connected Linan with Dadu, and maritime transportation improvements facilitated grain movement by both land and sea. In addition, the Yuan dynasty issued paper money to address the silver shortage and facilitate trade. This currency was printed with both the Fagspa script, a Mongolian script, and Chinese characters. Each note bore the seal of the Khan, which guaranteed its value, allowing it to circulate widely throughout the Yuan Empire. It was also used in government monopolies and tax payments, helping maintain the currency's stability. During the Yuan dynasty, popular culture flourished among the common people. In urban areas, Yuan drama became especially popular, and vernacular novels attracted a wide readership. Literature and theater played an important role in daily life and became deeply rooted in the culture of the common people. The Yuan dynasty adopted a religious and cultural tolerance policy, allowing diverse cultures to coexist. Kublai Khan emphasized harmony among religions and extended protection to various faiths, including Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, Daoism, Islam, Nestorian Christianity, and Roman Catholicism. These policies promoted peace and mutual understanding among people of different cultural and religious backgrounds, and played a key role in maintaining stability across the vast empire. As the Mongol Empire unified most of the Eurasian continent, exchanges between East and West became increasingly active. To govern its vast territory efficiently, the empire developed transportation networks and established a system of relay stations. Travelers who carried a special travel pass were granted access to lodging, food, horses, and carts at these stations. The expansion of the relay station network enabled the organized movement of envoys and officials, the transportation of goods, and the smooth exchange of information between regions. It also allowed for the rapid delivery of official documents, significantly strengthening imperial control. During the Yuan Dynasty, maritime trade networks expanded across Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean, leading to the prosperity of port cities. Coastal shipping routes connecting the south to the north also developed significantly. Alongside these trends, both overland and maritime trade between east and west flourished, and the capital city of Dadu emerged as a central hub in the Eurasian trade network, linking the continent with the seas. The Mongol Empire achieved stability and prosperity through its powerful military and cooperation with Muslim merchants. This period is known as the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace. It refers to when the Mongols unified much of the continent and promoted interaction among Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. As a result, trade between East and West and long-distance travel flourished. During this period, active exchanges significantly increased cultural interactions among China, the Western, and the Islamic world. Chinese inventions such as porcelain, silk, gunpowder, the compass, and printing technology spread to the West and influenced the development of science and the arts in Europe. Meanwhile, Islamic knowledge in astronomy, calendrical science, and mathematics was introduced to China and contributed to advancements in Chinese science and technology. Observatories were established, and under the influence of Islamic calendars, the season-granting calendar was created based on astronomical observation. In addition, painting techniques from the Yuan Dynasty influenced Persian miniature painting. However, by the 14th century, the Yuan Dynasty faced internal strife due to disputes over imperial succession, and government finances deteriorated due to extravagance and corruption among the ruling elite. In an attempt to resolve these issues, the government imposed heavy taxes and printed large amounts of paper money. However, this led to severe inflation and growing dissatisfaction among the people. Amid this unrest, the Red Turban Rebellion, led by the followers of the White Lotus sect, broke out, and in 1368, the Yuan Dynasty was driven north by the Ming Dynasty. In the mid-14th century, a wave of peasant uprisings broke out across China in resistance to the rule of the Yuan Dynasty. Amid this widespread turmoil, Zhu Yuanzhang, a former poor peasant, joined the Red Turban Rebellion. He later gathered anti-Yuan forces in the southern region and established the Ming Dynasty in Nanjing in 1368. After founding the dynasty, he launched a northern campaign to drive the Mongol forces beyond the Great Wall and established a new political and cultural order based on Han Chinese traditions. Emperor Hongwu, the founding ruler of the Ming Dynasty, sought to establish a Confucian state by promoting education and reforming the civil service examination system. He established schools throughout the country and issued the Six Maxims, a set of Confucian moral guidelines intended to cultivate ethical behavior among the common people. The Six Maxims instructed individuals to show filial piety to parents, respect elders, live in harmony with neighbors, educate their children properly, be diligent in their work, and refrain from wrongdoing. Through these values, the Hongwu Emperor aimed to maintain social order and reinforce a moral code grounded in Confucian ideals. To improve administrative and fiscal efficiency, Emperor Hongwu organized two key registers: the fish-scale land register for recording landholdings and the yellow register, which was used to assess and assign taxes and labor obligations based on household and population data. The fish-scale land register detailed the size, shape, ownership, cultivation, and tax obligations of each land parcel. It was named the fish-scale register because the shapes of the land plots, as drawn in the register, resembled fish scales. These registers allowed the government to accurately assess land taxes and labor obligations. To strengthen the centralized system of government, Emperor Hongwu implemented a series of institutional reforms. To reduce the power of his officials, he separated the functions of the civil, military, and censorate, allowing each to operate independently. This enabled the emperor to gain full control over state information and authority. Additionally, to support his growing administrative responsibilities, he appointed grand secretaries, who served as his personal assistants and advisors. These reforms significantly improved the efficiency of central administration. To defend against the threat of another Mongol invasion, Emperor Hongwu stationed his sons in key northern regions to strengthen border security. In the southeastern coastal areas, he implemented the Maritime Prohibition Policy, which banned private overseas trade and permitted only government-sanctioned tribute missions that allowed for limited trade. This policy aimed to suppress illegal trade and piracy, while increasing state control over maritime activities. The Yongle Emperor came to power through a political coup, and during his reign, the Ming Dynasty reached the heights of its imperial power and prestige. He oversaw the construction of the Forbidden City and moved the capital to Beijing. To ensure the smooth transportation of goods from the resource-rich southern regions to the new capital, he ordered the renovation of the Grand Canal. Pursuing an active policy of foreign expansion, the emperor personally led military campaigns against the Mongols in the north and extended Ming control as far south as Vietnam. In an effort to expand the Ming Dynasty's international influence, the Yongle Emperor commissioned a series of large-scale maritime expeditions led by a Muslim eunuch. He conducted a total of 7 voyages, reaching beyond India to the coasts of Africa. His fleet carried tribute offerings from foreign rulers, imperial gifts from the emperor, and diplomatic envoys. Through these missions, the Ming Dynasty established a tribute-based international order centered on China, extending its influence across Southeast Asia, India, West Asia, and even Africa. These expeditions greatly elevated the Ming Dynasty's maritime capabilities and global prestige. In the mid to late Ming period, a series of ineffectual emperors came to power, allowing eunuchs to seize actual control of the government. At the same time, emerging threats from Mongol forces in the north and Japanese pirates along the southeastern coast, known collectively as the Northern Barbarians and Southern Pirates, forced the state to invest heavily in repairing and strengthening the Great Wall, placing a significant strain on the imperial treasury. In the late 16th century, the leading Grand Secretary implemented nationwide land surveys and expanded the single whip reform in an effort to resolve the Ming Dynasty's fiscal crisis. These reforms temporarily restored stability to the state. However, after his death, political interference by court eunuchs and increasingly factional strife led to renewed internal disorder. Additionally, large sums were spent on military campaigns, including dispatching troops during the Japanese invasions of Korea and suppressing peasant uprisings across the empire. In the early 17th century, rising threats from the Jurchens in Manchuria further escalated defense spending. To cover growing deficits, the government imposed harsh taxes, while natural disasters and climate deterioration worsened rural conditions. These combined social and economic pressures sparked widespread rebellion, culminating in the fall of the Ming capital to a rebel army in 1644 and the eventual collapse of the dynasty. As the Ming Dynasty declined, Nurhaci unified the Jurchen tribes and founded the later Qin Dynasty in 1616. His successor, Hong Taiji, conquered Inner Mongolia, renamed the state the Qing Dynasty, and invaded Korea after it refused to submit. The Qing Dynasty developed a powerful military and, leveraging this strength, captured Beijing after the fall of the Ming Dynasty in 1644, establishing it as their capital. Following prolonged conquest campaigns, the Qing built a vast empire that ruled over territories far larger than those of the Ming Dynasty. During the reign of Emperor Kangxi, the Qing successfully suppressed the revolt of the three feudatories and defeated pro-Ming forces in Taiwan. Additionally, in 1689, the Qing signed the Treaty of Nerchinsk with Russia, officially establishing the border between the two empires. Emperor Yongjing ascended the throne as the emperor of the Qing Dynasty after succeeding Emperor Kangxi and focused on strengthening central authority and imperial power. He established the Grand Council to directly oversee military affairs and implemented the secret memorial system to consolidate his control over information and decision-making. Furthermore, he reformed the taxation system through the land and head tax reform, thereby stabilizing the dynasty's economic foundation. During Emperor Qianlong's reign, the Qing Dynasty reached its peak, enjoying a long period of peace and prosperity. During this time, Emperor Qianlong continued military campaigns to expand control over surrounding regions, such as Tibet, Xinjiang, and Mongolia, securing much of the territory that constitutes present-day China. Through these efforts, the Qing became a vast multi-ethnic empire, encompassing not only Manchus and Mongols, but also a large number of Han Chinese and various other ethnic minorities. The Qing dynasty asserted leadership over the East Asian order by strengthening the tributary system with neighboring states in East and Southeast Asia. These states paid tribute to the Qing court, which in return granted them formal recognition and protection, forming a mutually dependent relationship. In contrast, countries outside the tributary system, particularly Japan and Western powers, primarily engaged with the Qing through trade. In the mid-18th century, Emperor Qianlong restricted Western ships to the port of Guangzhou and placed foreign trade under the supervision of a merchant guild. In response, Britain, seeking to improve its unfavorable trade balance with China, dispatched the Macartney mission to the Qing court in 1793. The mission demanded the abolition of the merchant guild's monopoly and called for the establishment of a freer trade environment. However, Emperor Qianlong firmly rejected these requests, declaring that China was rich in goods and had no need for foreign products. He asserted that the existing trade in tea, porcelain, and silk was not an equal exchange between nations, but rather a favor graciously granted by the Qing. Founded by a minority ethnic group, the Manchus, the Qing dynasty sought to govern the overwhelmingly Han Chinese population by balancing coercion with conciliation. As part of its coercive policies, the Qing enforced the wearing of the queue hairstyle and Manchu-style clothing as symbols of submission to Manchu authority, aiming to weaken Han cultural identity. The Qing dynasty also sought to control Han intellectual life through a policy known as the Literary Inquisition. This policy involved strictly punishing those who criticized the regime or questioned the legitimacy of Manchu rule. The government banned specific characters, terms, phrases, and expressions, using the policy as a tool to suppress dissent and enforce ideological conformity. At the same time, as part of its conciliatory policies, the Qing dynasty implemented the Manchu-Han joint appointment system, which allocated certain key government positions equally to Manchus and Han Chinese, in an effort to promote ethnic harmony. The Qing also demonstrated respect for traditional Confucian culture and continued the civil service examination system, thereby securing the support and cooperation of the scholar official class. After the reign of Emperor Qianlong, the Qing dynasty faced a series of uprisings, including the White Lotus Rebellion, which significantly weakened Manchu authority. Although these rebellions were eventually suppressed, they severely damaged the Qing government's finances and exposed the limitations of the Eight Banners military system, which had previously supported Qing military strength. These challenges ultimately became major factors accelerating the decline of the dynasty. After the late 18th century, the Qing dynasty faced severe challenges. A rapid increase in population led to land shortages, causing many peasants to suffer from economic hardship. In addition, widespread corruption among officials weakened the government's efficiency and authority. Furthermore, external pressure from Western powers in East Asia, along with internal uprisings, such as the White Lotus Rebellion, contributed to the Qing dynasty's gradual decline. To regulate foreign trade, the Qing dynasty restricted all Western commerce to the port of Canton, and it operated the Kohong, a government-licensed guild of Chinese merchants who held exclusive rights to trade with foreigners. During this period, Britain imported large quantities of tea, porcelain, and silk from China, paying with vast amounts of silver. In an effort to resolve its growing trade deficit, Britain sent several diplomatic missions to request the opening of free trade, but the Qing government consistently refused. As a result, Britain turned to triangular trade, smuggling opium produced in its colony of India into China to offset the silver outflow. The Qing dynasty faced a severe social and economic crisis due to the illegal opium trade and the resulting widespread addiction. The influx of opium not only led to a sharp increase in the number of addicts, but also caused a massive outflow of silver, placing a heavy burden on the imperial treasury. In response, the Qing government dispatched an imperial commissioner to Canton, where he confiscated and destroyed large quantities of opium and imposed a ban on British trade. These strong measures marked a turning point in Qing-British relations. In 1840, Britain launched the Opium War against the Qing Dynasty, with the goal of expanding trade. After losing the war, the Qing signed the Treaty of Nanjing in 1842, which was the first modern treaty between China and a Western power, and is considered one of the first unequal treaties. Under the treaty, the Qing abolished the Cohong system, ceded Hong Kong Island to Britain, paid reparations, and agreed to open 5 ports to foreign trade. In 1843, the Qing signed a supplementary treaty, granting extraterritorial rights and most favored nation status to Britain. Similar treaties were soon signed with other Western powers, including the United States and France, placing China under increasing foreign pressure. Extraterritorial rights allowed foreigners to be tried under their own national laws, rather than those of the host country. Most favored nation status ensured that any privileges granted to one country in trade or navigation would automatically be extended to other countries with similar treaties. Despite the Treaty of Nanjing, the Qing government failed to implement its promises to improve trade relations fully. Using this as a pretext, Britain launched the Second Opium War in 1856. The immediate cause of the war was the Arrow Incident, in which Chinese authorities boarded the Arrow, a Chinese-owned vessel allegedly engaged in smuggling, but registered under the British flag, and arrested its crew while lowering the British ensign. Citing this incident as a violation of treaty rights, Britain joined forces with France and applied military pressure on the Qing. As a result, the Allied forces successively occupied Tianjin and Beijing. As a result of the Second Opium War, the Qing Dynasty signed the Treaty of Tientsin in 1858. The treaty required China to open 10 additional ports to foreign trade, permit Christian missionary activity, and allow foreign diplomats to reside in Beijing. However, during the ratification process, the Qing government attempted to repudiate the treaty. In response, Britain and France used military force in 1860 to compel the Qing to uphold the original agreement and force the signing of the Treaty of Beijing. Under this treaty, part of the Kowloon Peninsula was ceded to Britain. During this period, Russia, acting as a mediator, acquired the territory of Primoria from China. Together, the 2 Opium Wars accelerated China's semi-colonization and laid the groundwork for Russia's expansion into the Far East. After its defeat by Britain in the First Opium War, the Qing Dynasty suffered a significant blow to its international prestige. The aftermath of the war brought a surge in imports of Western goods and rising inflation. Additionally, war indemnities were forcibly collected from peasants, placing a heavy economic burden on rural populations. These conditions fueled widespread discontent among the peasantry and sparked numerous uprisings across China. Amid this turmoil, Hong Xiuquan, influenced by Christian beliefs, founded the God Worshippers Society and declared the establishment of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. In opposition to Confucian traditions and Manchu rule, the Taiping Rebellion promoted the slogan, "Eliminate the Manchus and restore the Han," aiming to reunify China and bring about radical social and political transformation. The Taiping forces launched a rebellion in Guangxi province and eventually captured Nanjing, which they established as the capital of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. They built a strong base in southern China and expanded their power significantly. The Taiping regime promoted radical reforms, including the equal distribution of land, gender equality, and the abolition of the traditional class system. They also opposed cultural practices, such as queue hairstyles and foot binding, which helped them gain widespread support among the peasantry. The Taiping Rebellion achieved considerable success in its early years. However, over time it faced growing resistance from local militia forces, organized by Han Chinese officials and gentry. In addition, following the Second Opium War, the Qing government, now cooperating with Western powers, launched a full-scale counterattack. Eventually, in 1864, the Taiping capital of Nanjing fell, marking the complete collapse of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. After experiencing the Opium Wars and the Taiping Rebellion, the Qing Dynasty recognized the superiority of Western science and technology and felt an urgent need for modernization and reform. In response, the Qing established a central government office that was responsible for handling foreign affairs and diplomacy. At the same time, the Qing launched the self-strengthening movement, which aimed to adopt Western technology to enhance military power and modernize the nation's industrial infrastructure. In its early phase, the self-strengthening movement focused on developing military industries and establishing Western-style armies and naval forces. Over time, however, the movement shifted its emphasis toward economic development through the operation of private enterprises, such as steamship companies and textile mills. It also brought changes to the field of education, including the establishment of modern schools and the dispatch of Chinese students to study abroad. However, the self-strengthening movement lacked systematic planning and support from the Qing government. Instead, regional officials implemented policies independently, resulting in a lack of consistency and efficiency, and ultimately yielding limited success. Most enterprises were managed by government officials, and internal structural problems requiring reform were largely ignored. Moreover, the guiding principle of Chinese learning as the foundation, Western technology for practical use, limited the movement's ability to bring about fundamental social and economic transformation. These weaknesses became painfully clear when China suffered a devastating defeat in the First Sino-Japanese War. After China's defeat in the First Sino-Japanese War, the Qing Dynasty was forced to cede Taiwan to Japan and pay a large indemnity. This outcome shocked Chinese society and intensified a sense of national crisis, as foreign powers increasingly scrambled for spheres of influence in China. In response, reform-minded intellectuals, recognizing the limitations of the self-strengthening movement, which had focused primarily on adopting Western technology, began calling for deeper political and social reforms to transform China into a modern nation-state. This led to the launch of the Reform Movement of 1898, a modernization initiative supported by the Guangxu Emperor and inspired by Japan's Meiji Restoration. Inspired by Japan's Meiji Restoration, Chinese reformers sought to restructure the political system by introducing Western-style constitutional monarchy and parliamentary institutions. They aimed to modernize various sectors by reforming the civil service examination system, promoting Western-style education, reforming legal and administrative systems, encouraging commerce and industry, and establishing a modern military. These efforts culminated in the 100 Days Reform of 1898, a bold modernization initiative. However, the reforms quickly faced fierce resistance from conservative factions. Ultimately, the movement was crushed in a coup, known as the 1898 coup, during which the Guangxu Emperor was placed under house arrest, bringing the reform to an end after just 100 days. In the wake of the failed reform efforts, the spread of Christianity, and increasing foreign encroachment and exploitation of China's resources, anti-foreign sentiment surged across the country. Against this backdrop, a secret society with roots in the White Lotus tradition emerged in Shandong Province, the Society of Righteous and Harmonious Fists, launching what became known as the Boxer Uprising. This movement sought to defend traditional Chinese culture and independence by opposing Western influence and Christianity. The Boxers, who practiced traditional martial arts, rose in rebellion under the slogan, "Support the Qing, destroy the foreign." They attacked churches, railways, and telegraph lines, and with support from elements of the Qing government, laid siege to foreign legations in Beijing. The Qing government sought to use the Boxers to resist foreign powers, but the movement quickly escalated into an international crisis. In response, 8 nations, including Britain, Germany, and Japan, allied and intervened militarily under the pretext of protecting their citizens, ultimately crushing the Boxer forces. As a result, the Qing was forced to sign the Boxer Protocol in 1901, which required the payment of a massive indemnity and permitted the stationing of foreign troops in Beijing. This severely undermined China's sovereignty and economy, further intensifying anti-colonial sentiment within the country. In response to the international crisis following the signing of the Boxer Protocol with the Western powers, the Qing government implemented the New Policies Reform in an effort to pursue full-scale modernization. As part of this reform, the traditional civil service examination system was abolished, and a Western-style education system was introduced. A modern army was established, and the government actively promoted industrial and commercial development. Furthermore, aiming to transform China into a constitutional monarchy, the Qing issued the outline of the Imperial Constitution. However, after the failure of the Boxer Uprising, revolutionary movements aiming to overthrow the Qing Dynasty gradually spread, both within and outside of China. Sun Yat-sen, emerged as a key leader of the revolution, advocating for the establishment of a republic. In 1905, he founded the Chinese United League in Tokyo, Japan, along with overseas Chinese students and young intellectuals educated in modern schools. Sun promoted the three principles of the people: nationalism, democracy, and people's livelihood, as the guiding ideology of the revolution. The Chinese United League became the main revolutionary organization, leading armed uprisings across various regions of China. In the three principles of the people, nationalism refers to overthrowing the Manchu-led Qing Dynasty and restoring sovereignty to the Han Chinese. Democracy means granting equal political rights to all citizens through the creation of a republican government. People's livelihood emphasizes improving living conditions and promoting economic well-being through land reforms and social welfare policies. As the Qing government slowed down preparations for constitutional reform, a nationwide petition movement demanding the opening of a national assembly gained momentum, putting significant political pressure on the regime. Meanwhile, the Qing faced a severe financial crisis caused by the costs of reform and the indemnities imposed by the Boxer Protocol. In response, the government nationalized privately funded railways and tried to use them as collateral for foreign loans. This action sparked widespread opposition. In 1911, revolutionary forces within the new army in Wuchang launched an anti-Qing uprising, marking the start of the Xinhai Revolution. Provinces that supported the revolution declared their independence from the Qing Dynasty, and the movement rapidly spread throughout China. In 1912, the following year, revolutionary forces took control of Nanjing and established the Republic of China, appointing Sun Yat-sen as the provisional president, thereby creating the first republican government in Chinese history. To suppress the revolution, the Qing government turned to Yuan Shikai, a powerful military leader. However, instead of crushing the revolutionary forces, Yuan negotiated with them and agreed to the abdication of the Qing emperor in exchange for becoming president. He was then appointed provisional president of the Republic of China. During his presidency, Yuan tried to restore the monarchy and declare himself emperor, but his efforts faced widespread opposition. Before he could consolidate his power, he died of illness in 1916. After his death, China remained a republic in name only. Central authority weakened, and regional warlords gained power, plunging the country into political chaos. After the Xinhai Revolution, Yuan Shikai's presidency and his attempt to restore the monarchy badly damaged the early political stability of the Republic of China and threw the country into chaos. After his death in 1916, this instability worsened as regional warlords took control across the country. Amid this political turmoil, Chinese intellectuals launched the magazine New Youth to challenge Confucian traditions and promote democracy and Western science. Their efforts became a key part of the New Culture movement, which encouraged independent and critical thinking, fostered a new humanistic spirit, and inspired students to develop a stronger sense of national identity. During World War I, Japan took control of Qingdao in the Shandong Peninsula, which had been under German rule, and in 1915 submitted the 21 demands to the Chinese government in an effort to expand its influence in China. After the war, at the Paris Peace Conference, China demanded the return of the Shandong Peninsula, the cancellation of the 21 demands, and the restoration of all concessions occupied by Japan. However, China was unable to gain international support, and the conference ultimately decided to transfer the German-held rights in Shandong to Japan. In response, more than 3,000 university students in Beijing organized a large protest on May 4, 1919, marking the start of the May 4th movement. The students called for the cancellation of the 21 demands, opposed Japanese imperialism, and demanded the removal of domestic warlords. The protests quickly spread across the country, growing into a widespread patriotic movement that included merchants, workers, and other parts of society united against foreign invasion and internal corruption. In 1924, the Nationalist Party, led by Sun Yat-sen, formed the First United Front with the Chinese Communist Party to initiate a national revolution aimed at defeating warlords and reunifying a divided China. After Sun's death in 1925, Chiang Kai-shek became a prominent leader in the Nationalist Party and successfully led the Northern Expedition, defeating various warlord factions. This campaign ended with the creation of a new central government under Nationalist Party control in 1928. However, during the unification process, Chiang turned against the Communists and carried out a harsh purge of Communist members in Shanghai. As a result, the First United Front fell apart. In response to Nationalist Party rule and ongoing military suppression, the Chinese Communist Party set up rural bases through land reform efforts. While initially effective, the Communists gradually found themselves cornered due to a series of encirclement campaigns by the Nationalists. Under mounting pressure, the Red Army, led by the Chinese Communist Party, broke through nationalist blockades and initiated the Long March in 1934. The campaign lasted until 1936 and covered approximately 25,000 li. During the Long March, Mao Zedong solidified his leadership within the Communist Party, ultimately establishing a new revolutionary base in Yan'an. In 1931, Japan used the Mukden incident as a pretext to invade Manchuria and later established the puppet state of Manchukuo, leading to its full-scale invasion of mainland China. This aggression grew into the Second Sino-Japanese War, which started in 1937. In December 1936, the Xi'an incident happened when Zhang Shuiliang, a warlord from Manchuria, detained Chiang Kai-shek to demand an end to the Civil War and a united front against Japan. As a result, the Second United Front was created, and the Nationalist Party and the Chinese Communist Party started a full-scale war of resistance against Japanese aggression. After World War II ended, a renewed civil war broke out in China between the Chinese Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong, and the Nationalist Party. The Communists emerged victorious, and in 1949, they declared the founding of the People's Republic of China. The defeated Nationalist Party and its leader, Chiang Kai-shek, retreated to Taiwan, where they set up a separate government. After winning the Chinese Civil War, the Communist Party established the People's Republic of China in 1949 and initiated a series of reforms to restructure the country's economic and social systems. These reforms involved land redistribution, the nationalization of banks and major industries, and the implementation of state-led economic development plans. In the late 1950s, Mao Zedong launched the Great Leap Forward, an ambitious effort to rapidly grow China's economy by organizing large-scale collective farms, called people's communes, in rural areas. However, the campaign failed because of unrealistic planning, poor execution, declining worker morale, and a series of natural disasters. Facing a political setback, Mao later started the Cultural Revolution, saying it was necessary to finish the Communist Revolution. To oppose capitalist tendencies and challenge the existing elite within Chinese society, Mao Zedong mobilized the Red Guards, a large student-led movement. The Red Guards played a key role in removing officials who supported pragmatic economic reforms. During the Cultural Revolution, traditional Chinese culture was widely attacked, and artists, intellectuals, and educators faced persecution and repression. The movement caused widespread political, economic, and social chaos throughout the country. After Mao Zedong's death in 1976, Deng Xiaoping rose to power and acknowledged the mistakes of the Cultural Revolution. He promoted a pragmatic approach to governance and launched a series of reform and opening up policies. One of his most well-known ideas was the black cat, white cat theory, which stated that it doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice. This metaphor reflected Deng's belief that any policy capable of improving people's livelihoods should be pursued, regardless of ideology. Alongside his idea that some people should be allowed to be rich first, these principles played a crucial role in driving China's economic development during the 1980s. Under Deng Xiaoping's reform and opening up policies, China experienced rapid economic growth. While incorporating elements of a capitalist market economy, the country maintained its socialist political system, developing what became known as socialism with Chinese characteristics. Additionally, Deng's open-door policy boosted foreign investments, energizing the economy. Special economic zones were created in several eastern coastal cities, fostering lively interactions with overseas Chinese communities and foreign companies. As a result, China's economy expanded rapidly. However, these changes also led to serious social problems, and as a result, in 1989, students and intellectuals, frustrated by corruption and the lack of political freedoms, organized protests in Tiananmen Square, demanding reform. The Chinese government responded with military force, resulting in the tragic Tiananmen incident, in which many lives were lost. China continued to advance its reform and opening up policies, boosting economic growth and greatly strengthening its national power and international reputation. During this period, China regained sovereignty over Hong Kong from the United Kingdom in 1997 and over Macau from Portugal in 1999. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe for more. Robin's Historical Records.